Have you ever stopped to think about what's really happening behind the scenes of the world? While most of us are busy paying bills, working, and just trying to get through the day, there are those who claim that dark forces are plotting something much bigger, something that could change humanity forever. Imagine a scenario where the religions you know are discredited, divine holograms appear in the skies, and a fake alien invasion is used as an excuse to create a single global government. Sounds like science fiction, right? But what if I told you this is part of a theory known as Project Blue Beam, which has been gaining traction among conspiracy theorists? What makes this even scarier is that it's not just about political or economic control. It goes deeper, exploring mental manipulation, electromagnetic waves, and even the creation of a new global faith. The global elites, the shadowy figures operating behind the scenes, are said to be behind a meticulous plan to shape our minds and hearts. They want us to believe in something false, something designed to unite us under one banner, the New World Order. But before you think, this could never happen, stop and reflect. How many times has controlled media sold us narratives that we later discovered were false? How often have we been deceived by distorted information or misinformation? The power of psychological manipulation is more present than we realize. And if that same technique were used to deceive billions of people all at once, would we even be able to see through the deception? In this text, we're diving deep into this dark territory. We'll explore how Project Blue Beam allegedly plans to use advanced technology like holograms and electromagnetic waves to control our minds and create a world where freedom is just an empty word. You'll understand how traditional religions could be dismantled, how a false messianic figure might emerge, and how a supposed alien invasion could be the final piece of the puzzle. If you're ready to open your eyes to the potential threats lurking in our society, keep reading. This is an invitation to question, investigate, and, above all, resist. After all, knowledge is power, and the first step in combating manipulation is understanding it. If you've heard of Project Blue Beam, know that it's much more than just another conspiracy theory. In fact, many believe it's a carefully orchestrated plan to establish a single global government under the guise of global unity. The goal? To consolidate power in the hands of a few, the so-called global elites, who would use advanced technology to manipulate billions of people. It sounds like something out of a Hollywood movie, but some say the preparations are already underway. At the heart of this idea is the strategic use of holograms and other technological tools to create false events that seem real. Imagine a scenario where spiritual leaders from different religions appear in the sky, speaking directly to humanity. It would be an incredible experience, right? But what if it was all just an illusion created to discredit traditional beliefs and replace them with a new, controlled faith? That's exactly the kind of manipulation the project supposedly seeks to implement. Moreover, we can't ignore the role of electromagnetic waves in this plan. Many theorists suggest these waves could be used to interfere with brain functions, implanting thoughts and influencing behaviors without us even realizing it. This would pave the way for an unprecedented level of mind control, where people act like puppets in the hands of shadowy minds. After all, who can guarantee that our own thoughts are truly ours? The New World Order, often associated with the project, would be the final result of this social engineering. Borders between countries would be erased, and a centralized system would take over every aspect of human life. Local economies would be replaced by a rental economy, where nothing is truly ours. Everything would be monitored and controlled, from what we consume to what we think. A dark future, isn't it? But here's the crucial point. Are we walking into this without realizing it? After all, we live in an era where controlled media shapes narratives and creates convenient truths. We've seen this before, with wars justified by lies and fabricated economic crises. Project Blue Beam may just be another chapter in this story, but its consequences would be irreversible. And the next step? Well, that's where things start to get even scarier. For now, all of this may sound like speculation, but it's worth reflecting on the signs around us. Who are the figures behind these ideas? What role do groups like the Bilderberg Club or the World Economic Forum play in this possible globalist agenda? These questions lead us to explore more deeply how traditional religions are being discredited to make way for a new spiritual order. But that's a conversation for the next topic. If there's one thing that unites billions of people around the world, it's traditional religions. They offer answers to life's big questions, along with a sense of belonging and purpose. However, according to theories surrounding Project Blue Beam, these ancient beliefs would be targeted by a systematic attack. The goal? To destroy trust in existing religions and clear the way for a new global faith, controlled by the same global elites seeking to dominate the planet. One of the strategies mentioned involves the use of falsified archaeological discoveries. Imagine finding scientific evidence that contradicts the sacred texts of various traditions. This could create widespread doubt about the truth of stories like those of Jesus, Muhammad, or Buddha. After all, if something as fundamental as the origin of our beliefs were disproven, how many would continue forward without questioning? This kind of misinformation would be the first blow against traditional religions. But it doesn't stop there. There are reports that divine holograms would appear in the sky, speaking directly to humanity in different languages and cultures. These events would be designed to look miraculous, but in reality, they'd be a sophisticated form of manipulation. The idea is that these sacred figures would eventually merge into a single messianic entity, someone representing the much-talked-about Antichrist. It would be a new global savior, but their intentions would be anything but altruistic. This new faith would be carefully planned to unify humanity under one spiritual banner. However, it would be far from genuine. In practice, it would be a tool of control in the hands of the shadowy minds operating behind the scenes. People would be encouraged to abandon their traditions, rituals, and even their families in the name of this new order. And those who resisted, they would likely be marginalized or labeled enemies of global peace. The scariest part is that this transition may already be happening subtly. We're already seeing today how certain currents promote the idea of a new age, where mysticism and esotericism replace organized religions. This narrative is presented as progressive, but is it really liberating? Or is it just another step toward a completely submissive society under mind control agendas? Though it may seem distant, this scenario is closer than we think. After all, we're already witnessing how technology and media can influence our perceptions and decisions. But what happens when this manipulation goes beyond the political or economic sphere and invades the spiritual realm? How would we react to seeing our deities presented as celestial holograms? These questions lead us to the next phase of the plan, the grand celestial spectacle. Stay tuned. Imagine looking up at the sky and seeing figures you've always considered divine. Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, appearing in all their glory, delivering messages directly to humanity. It would be a moment of spiritual ecstasy, right? But what if I told you it could all just be an illusion projected by advanced technology? That's the essence of what many call the grand celestial spectacle, a crucial phase of Project Blue Beam. The idea is to create an event so grand that no one would question its authenticity. The divine holograms would be projected using cutting-edge technology, possibly developed in secret military programs or laboratories run by global elites. These images wouldn't just look real, they'd also interact with people, speaking in their native languages and even quoting sacred texts. For many, it would be the ultimate proof of the existence of something greater. However, everything would be under control, programmed to guide humanity toward accepting a single global messianic figure, someone representing the Antichrist. But why would this be so effective? The answer lies in human psychology. When confronted with something that seems miraculous, our critical thinking tends to diminish. People would be so awestruck by these celestial events that they wouldn't question their origin or intent. It would be like watching a light and shadow show projected onto the clouds, but with much deeper consequences. We'd be deceived on a planetary scale without even realizing it. Moreover, some suggest that these holograms wouldn't just be visual but also accompanied by specific sounds and vibrations. Using electromagnetic waves, the elites could induce altered states of consciousness, making people even more susceptible to manipulation. Imagine being in a trance-like spiritual state while divine figures speak directly to you. It would almost be impossible to resist the idea that it was real, even though it was just an elaborate hoax. This celestial spectacle would also serve another purpose, unifying rival religions under one banner. By presenting these sacred figures as aspects of the same messianic entity, divisions between different traditions would disappear. This might sound like a positive step toward global peace, but in practice, it would be the opposite. We'd be trading our genuine beliefs for a fabricated faith, created exclusively to serve the interests of the New World Order. And when we think we've seen the worst, another question arises. What happens after this new faith is established? How would people react upon discovering they'd been deceived? Or will we never find out? These questions lead us to the next phase of the plan, where manipulation goes beyond the spiritual and invades the realm of the human mind. Brace yourself to explore the role of electromagnetic waves and the true meaning of mind control. If you think the use of divine holograms is scary, wait until you understand how electromagnetic waves could be used to manipulate our brains. This technology, often associated with Project Blue Beam, has the potential to interfere directly with our brain functions. The idea is to implant thoughts, emotions, and even beliefs without us realizing it. It sounds like something out of a dystopian novel, but some say it's already being tested. The science behind it isn't as unknown as it seems. Research on non-invasive brain stimulation has already shown that it's possible to influence moods and behaviors using specific frequencies. In the context of mind control, these techniques could be scaled up to create a docile and submissive population. Imagine waking up every day with thoughts you believe are yours but were actually implanted while you slept. Scary, isn't it? What makes this phase even more dangerous is that it could be implemented subtly, without big announcements or shocking events. The global elites could use existing communication networks, like cell towers and satellites, to transmit these electromagnetic waves on a global scale. This means no one would be safe, not even those living in remote areas. It would be like a silent invasion, where the enemy isn't seen but is felt in every thought. Moreover, brain manipulation wouldn't be limited to inducing obedience. It could also be used to create social divisions, amplify fears, and even trigger conflicts. For example, imagine two people receiving opposing messages through these waves, leading them to distrust each other. This kind of internal misinformation would be a powerful tool to keep the population fragmented and unable to unite against the true controllers. But are we already experiencing something similar? Many theorists point to the rise in mental illnesses, collective anxiety, and irrational behaviors as signs that something is happening behind the scenes. Of course, this could be attributed to various factors, but we can't ignore the possibility that part of it is the result of large-scale psychological manipulation experiments. After all, who can guarantee that our thoughts are truly ours? Though all this sounds like science fiction, it's worth reflecting on the technological advances of recent years. If we've already created artificial intelligences capable of predicting human behavior, how far can we go with brain manipulation? And more importantly, how can we protect ourselves from it? These questions lead us to the next phase of the plan, where humanity will face an event that will change everything: the false alien invasion. But that's a story for the next topic. Now we've reached the final phase of Project Blue Beam, and it's undoubtedly the most shocking of all: a false alien invasion. Imagine looking up at the sky and seeing gigantic spaceships hovering over the world's largest cities. Panic would be instantaneous, and humanity would unite in search of answers. But what if it was all just an elaborate setup? A technological trick designed to consolidate the control of global elites over the population. This invasion would be carried out using advanced holograms and large-scale projections, combined with sound effects and even simulated explosions. The idea is to create a sense of extraterrestrial threat so convincing that no one would question its authenticity. For many, it would be the most terrifying event of their lives. However, everything would be controlled by human minds, or rather, by the same shadowy figures who planned the earlier phases of the project. The goal of this fake invasion would be to unify humanity under a single global government. After all, faced with an alien threat, who could argue against the need for international cooperation? Borders would dissolve, armies would centralize, and emergency measures would be implemented to protect the population. In practice, this would mean the total surrender of our individual freedoms in exchange for fabricated security. But here's the crucial point: how would people react upon discovering it was all a hoax? By then, it would probably be too late. Power structures would already be consolidated, and any resistance would be quickly silenced. Moreover, controlled media would play an essential role in this process, presenting the invasion as proof of the need for centralized government. It would be yet another example of how misinformation can shape our perception of reality. Another worrying aspect is that this phase would also use elements of psychological manipulation. The same electromagnetic waves mentioned earlier could be employed to amplify fear and urgency. Imagine physically feeling the terror of an alien invasion even though deep down something feels off. This kind of sensory manipulation would leave people completely vulnerable to the narratives imposed by the elites. In the end, the false alien invasion would be the culmination of a meticulously planned scheme to dominate humanity. But are we prepared to see the signs before it's too late? How can we differentiate what's real from what's fabricated in a world where technology advances faster than our ability to understand it? These questions lead us to the next step: the importance of controlled media and whistleblowers trying to alert the public. But that's a conversation for the next topic. If there's one thing keeping Project Blue Beam in motion, it's controlled media. It not only shapes the narratives we consume daily but also sets the stage for events like the false alien invasion or the creation of a new global faith. Without this powerful tool, it would be much harder to convince billions of people to accept ideas that, under other circumstances, would be questioned or rejected. After all, who can compete with such a well-oiled propaganda machine? Traditional media, allied with digital platforms, has the power to turn lies into absolute truths. Just observe how certain topics are repeated endlessly until they become facts. This creates a fabricated reality where people stop thinking critically and start accepting everything they're presented with. In the context of the project, this means global elites can use media to spread fear, confusion, and even hope, depending on the ultimate goal. It's a form of control as effective as it is invisible. But the manipulation doesn't stop there. So-called whistleblowers, figures who supposedly reveal secrets of the elites, could also be part of the game. Many theorists suggest these individuals are carefully planted to divert attention or present distorted versions of the truth. Thus, while some fight against fake conspiracies, the real ones continue operating behind the scenes. This kind of misinformation is a powerful weapon to keep the public distracted. Another important point is how the media uses fear to shape behavior. For example, by amplifying extraterrestrial threats or global economic crises, it creates a sense of urgency that justifies extreme measures. This paves the way for authoritarian policies and the centralization of power, all under the pretext of protecting the population. After all, who would question decisions made in the name of security? This is where the crucial role of psychological manipulation comes in. However, not all is lost. There are still independent voices trying to expose these control strategies. The problem is that many of these alternative sources end up being marginalized or labeled as conspiracy theories. This creates a vicious cycle where the truth is silenced and official narratives prevail. But are we doomed to live in a world where the truth is always obscured? Or is there still room for resistance? This battle between information and misinformation is just one piece of the larger puzzle. After all, whoever controls the narrative controls the masses. And when we think about the agendas promoted by groups like the Council on Foreign Relations or the World Economic Forum, it becomes clear that globalism is much more than just an ideology. It's a strategy to concentrate power and resources in the hands of a few. But how does this work in practice? That's the next step in our journey. When we talk about globalism, many people think of a positive idea, a borderless world where everyone works together for peace and prosperity. However, beneath this idealistic facade, something much darker is happening. Groups like the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR, the Bilderberg Club, and the World Economic Forum are often pointed to as the gears behind this globalist agenda. These global elites aren't interested in equality or cooperation but in consolidating power and resources in the hands of a few. Globalism, in practice, means eliminating national sovereignty in favor of centralized government. It may seem like a logical solution to global problems like climate change or pandemics, but the cost is high, the loss of individual freedom and total control over our lives. The elites know that to implement this system, they need to create artificial crises, like wars, economic collapses, or even fake alien invasions, that justify the need for a global government. It's a strategic game where fear is used as a tool of manipulation. But who are these figures operating behind the scenes? Many theorists suggest they belong to powerful families whose roots trace back centuries of political and economic influence. These people don't appear on magazine covers or newspaper headlines, but their decisions directly impact our lives. They meet at closed-door events like the Bilderberg conferences to discuss humanity's future, a future shaped according to their interests, not ours. It's a kind of power few can imagine, let alone question. This globalist agenda also has a concerning economic side. The vision of a society based on models like the rental economy is a clear example of this. Imagine a world where you own nothing. Not your house, not your car, not even your electronic devices. Everything would be rented from giant corporations, controlled by the same elites promoting globalism. This scenario not only concentrates wealth but also creates total population dependence on the imposed systems. However, not all globalist agendas are implemented directly. Often, they're introduced gradually through policies that seem harmless at first glance. For example, international agreements on the environment or technology could be used as excuses to impose regulations that limit national autonomy. It's a game of patience where small steps lead to big transformations. And by the time we realize what's happening, it's already too late. The question that remains is, how do we resist something so vast and invisible? The first step is recognizing that globalism isn't just an ideology but a strategy of control. When we understand this, we begin to see the connections between seemingly isolated events, from economic crises to narratives promoted by the media. But the real challenge lies in identifying how these elites are shaping our culture and economy to serve their own interests. And that's exactly what we'll explore in the next topic. Now that we understand how globalism serves as a tool of power for global elites, it's time to dive into how this agenda directly impacts our culture and economy. After all, it's not just about politics or technology, it's about shaping the way we live, think, and even consume. And one of the subtlest strategies has been promoting a society based on the concept of a rental economy, where nothing is truly ours. Imagine a future where everything is accessed temporarily, from housing to cars, clothes, and even digital content. This model is already being implemented by large companies, many of them linked to the same elites promoting globalism. The idea is to create total dependence on centralized systems, where people continuously pay for the use of goods and services but never truly own anything. This not only concentrates wealth in the hands of a few but also makes us hostages to an oppressive economic system. But the manipulation goes beyond the financial. Culture is also shaped to serve the interests of the elites. Movies, TV series, music, and even social media are used to promote specific narratives, often aligned with the idea of a new world order. These messages may seem harmless at first glance, but they gradually wear down our traditional values and replace our beliefs with something fabricated. It's a form of control as effective as it is invisible. Another worrying aspect is how consumer culture is encouraged to keep people distracted. The more we spend, the less we question the system governing us. The elites know this and use marketing strategies to keep us trapped in a continuous cycle of desire and momentary satisfaction. The result? A materialistic, alienated society incapable of uniting against authoritarian agendas. That's exactly what they want. There's something even more insidious happening: the disconnection between people. Modern culture, driven by digital platforms, is isolating us from one another. Instead of building real communities, we're encouraged to live in virtual bubbles, where interactions are superficial and connections are fragile. This weakens our ability to collectively resist the control imposed by the elites. After all, who can fight against something when they're alone? This combination of cultural and economic manipulation creates a scenario where individual freedom is almost impossible to achieve. But are we condemned to live in this controlled world? Or is there still room to see the traps and seek alternatives? These questions lead us to the next topic, where we'll explore the importance of recognizing the subtle forms of psychological manipulation and how we can resist the deception behind it all. We've reached the most crucial point of this journey: the need to recognize the subtle forms of psychological manipulation behind Project Bluebeam and other global agendas. After all, the greatest danger isn't in the advanced technologies or elaborate plans by global elites but in our own inability to see the deception right in front of our eyes. When we stop questioning, we hand over our power of choice without even realizing it. The first thing to understand is that manipulation doesn't happen in an obvious way. It hides in narratives that seem harmless, in events that look like coincidences, and even in ideas that sound progressive or altruistic. For example, who would imagine that an environmental agenda, something that seems so noble, could be used to impose authoritarian regulations? Or that the promise of global unity could just be an excuse to eliminate our individual freedoms? This is where the importance of developing a sharp critical sense comes in. But how do we combat something as invisible as manipulation? The first step is staying alert to the signs. This means observing patterns, connecting dots, and not accepting information without questioning it first. Remember, controlled media and digital influencers are often key players in this game of control. They shape our opinions and behaviors in ways we don't always notice. So, it's worth diversifying your sources of information and seeking independent voices that genuinely seek the truth. Another important point is strengthening real human connections. In times of digital isolation, it's easy to fall into the trap of living in virtual bubbles, where everything is filtered by algorithms. But it's genuine face-to-face interactions that remind us of who we are and what truly matters. By building trust-based communities with open dialogue, we create a network of resistance against the fabricated narratives created by the shadowy minds operating behind the scenes. Moreover, we need to educate ourselves about the tools being used against us. From electromagnetic waves to mind control techniques, there's much to learn about how our perception can be altered without our knowledge. Books like George Orwell's 1984 or documentaries like Century of Enslavement can be great starting points for better understanding these mechanisms of domination. The more we know, the harder it will be to be deceived. Ultimately, the fight against deception begins within ourselves. It's a journey of self-discovery, where we learn to differentiate what's real from what's fabricated. But that doesn't mean we're alone in this battle. There are millions of people around the world waking up to reality. Together, we can create a future where individual freedom and truth prevail over control and manipulation. Are you ready to do your part? We've reached the end of this journey, but the path you choose to take from here is what truly matters. After all, what will you do with all this information? Will you simply ignore the signs, or will you start questioning the narratives surrounding you? Remember, knowledge without action is like a flashlight turned off in a dark room. It only has value when used to illuminate the way. Think about it. If Project Bluebeam, globalism, and psychological manipulation strategies are real, what's your role in this scenario? Are you willing to give up your individual freedom in exchange for empty promises of security or comfort? Or would you rather fight for a world where truth prevails over deception? These are questions only you can answer, but remember that every choice you make today shapes tomorrow's future. And don't think you're alone in this battle. There are millions of people around the world waking up to reality. Together, we can create resistance networks, share knowledge, and strengthen our communities. Change starts with small steps. Question more, consume less, connect with the people around you, and seek reliable sources of information. Every action counts, no matter how small it may seem. Additionally, don't underestimate the power of education. Read books that expand your worldview, watch documentaries that challenge the status quo, and participate in debates that encourage critical thinking. The more we know, the harder it will be to be deceived. And if you want to keep exploring these ideas, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to follow more content like this. Together, we can unravel the mysteries around us and build a better future. But before we wrap up, let me leave you with one last question. What are you willing to sacrifice to protect your freedom? Is it worth trading your autonomy for temporary conveniences? Or are you ready to face the challenges that come with the pursuit of truth? These are decisions that will define not only your destiny but the destiny of all humanity. So what do you choose? To stay in the shadows or to seek the light? The decision is yours and the future depends on it. We're in this together.